Hello, Lab Rats. Welcome to Lab Rat Academy. I am so excited that you were able to join me for today's lab. You have signed up for the Basic Anatomy Lab, and this is one of my funnest labs. This is actually the first lab I ever developed for Lab Rat Academy. So, welcome. And you have a strange assortment of materials if you were able to get those materials, and we're going to be walking through that. We have some fun curriculum we're going to be watching, and let's go ahead and get started. We're going to take a look at the curriculum that we have today. So let's take a look at that. So I want to find out from you guys what you know about earthworms. So first of all, I have on the curriculum a kind of like an animation, a cartoon of what a worm might look like. So I'm wondering from you guys, what do you know about worms? Do you think that a worm has antennas? Probably not. If you think about what a worm does and where they live and what do they do for a living, antennas might get in the way just a little bit. From what I know about worms, they are actually digging in the dirt with their heads. So if they had an antenna on their head, those would get in the way. They'd probably get smushed. What about eyes? Do you think worms have eyes? You may or may not know, but if you think about it, a worm, if they're digging with their face in the dirt, eyes would probably not be a good thing for them to have on their face because they get dirt in their eyes, and that's probably not a very good idea. So what about a tongue? Does a worm have a tongue? Well, do you even know what a worm eats? If a worm eats what's in the dirt, maybe like leaves and composting type stuff, you might realize that they might not have a tongue like we do. We have a tongue for swallowing and for talking and things like that, but a worm might not have that. So what about arms? If they're digging in the dirt all the time, I did say they dig with their face, then maybe they might not have arms or legs for running around. So probably you already know, and you've probably seen worms before. Worms do not have arms for digging. Those would probably get in the way as well as they're worming their way through the dirt. Very interesting. So before I show you a picture of what a worm looks like, you want to think about it. You actually have a bag of a worm in front of you. A worm is like this. A worm looks like that. Now, if you look at that slide there, you'll notice that the worm is kind of long and skinny. But if I looked at that and I'm wondering, is that a snake or is that a worm? Because snakes, as far as I know, are long and skinny and they kind of worm along on the ground too. But this looks a little bit different than the snake. Now, you might want to pick out a couple things. First of all, this worm that you see in front of you looks kind of wet. Snakes are not wet unless they're just came out of the water. This worm doesn't have any eyes, and we know that a snake has eyes. And this worm doesn't look like it has a tongue flicking out of it like a snake does. Also, this worm has little rings around it, which snakes don't have. Snakes have scales for skin. So this worm is called an annelida because it has these rings. And these rings actually are segments through its whole body. It actually goes all the way through. It's a very smart thing to have. So this is a worm. So I'm going to show you a video of how a worm moves through the dirt. So you'll see here that on this slide, we will have the worm pushing its head forward and then he pulls his tail. So he pushes his head and then he pulls his tail. And I'm wondering, do you think I could do that? Am I able to push my head nice and tall and pull my feet up? If you think about what's inside of me, you probably think about, why can a worm do that and I can't? Let's watch that slide again one more time. All right, so if you look at this, you'll notice that the worm actually doesn't have any bones inside of his body. That's why he can push his head forward and then pull his tail. Now, a snake can't move that way because he has those bones that connect him together, so he can't stretch bones. But a worm, because he doesn't have any bones, he can stretch his head and then pull his tail. That's really cool. And so since he doesn't have bones, we call a worm an invertebrate because they don't have a vertebrae down their back like we do.